And now for something completely different.
What's going on, YouTube? Well, again, we're in for something completely different on my channel. Even though I'm the history buff, this is kind of the first time I'm going down that road doing that history thing. Usually I cover music and things like that. It's usually historically related. But now I'm just going down more like, instructional videos and things like that because they're fun. I recently just did the history of the world, maybe, I think is what it's called. And a lot of people seem to enjoy it, and they recommended that I check out OverSimplified. So I started looking, and I wanted to do something new, but I saw it's been about 7 months since I did a video. And as I was perusing, I found Henry VIII, which really caught my eye because I am incredibly into the Tudor line, different lines in England and France and things like that. It's kind of primarily what I studied. I also studied a lot of Reformation and Crusades and things like that. So of course, Henry VIII played a big part kind of in his own little Reformation that happened in England. And in fact, you get kind of say that as Henry VIII that kind of got me into history at all because a long time ago, my wife and I were watching The Tudors, which is a show with Jonathan Rhys Meyers, which was really, really good. Not entirely like dead on as far as accuracy, but still a great show. And for whatever reason, I was kind of in a point where I was deciding my major. I'm like, I'm gonna do history, damn it. I'm gonna study like medieval history. So, just a really interesting story. And that kind of was it. I got a bachelor's in history and in literature, and I got my master's and all that. My wife has two masters in history, so my poor kids are just bombarded with history. So that's kind of why I call myself, a historian. I mean, I've studied a lot of this stuff and written papers and blah. So, but it's been a while, so I'm interested to watch this, and I promise not to pause a ton and make this like a hour and a half long video because it's already 26 minutes, which oversimplified. It's kind of shocked me to see that it was that long. I thought it was just going to be kind of like a quick little blurb. So I don't have to pause a ton, just a quick little overview of the generalization of what I remember of Henry VIII. So basically most people know, that he was a king in England, right? People who know a little bit will say, well, he had a lot of wives and he killed them all, which very oversimplified, right? In fact, he only had two of them killed. In fact, it goes, divorced, killed, divorced, killed, died, divorce, killed, alive. So he had 6 wives, and that's kind of the fates that each one of them had. So there is that, and of course, when you dig into it, he had kind of his reasons why each one happened. Not that they were good reasons, but there was a rhyme or reason to things. People who know a little bit more about him would say, well, he was responsible for starting the Church of England, basically his own church, just so he could get a divorce and marry who he wanted. Which again, oversimplified, but those were kind of his big landmarks. But some positive things about this king, not too many people realize back in the day he would have stood for quite a bit because he was pretty much the first king that was like the offspring that was pretty much going to unite England in a way, because before that you had the nasty, nasty War of the Roses between basically the two warring parts of the family that all came from Edward III. You've got the Yorks and the Lancasters, and they've been fighting for a long time. And then basically the Lancaster male, which would have been Henry VII, Henry Tudor, married Elizabeth, right? And when they had children, then Henry was one of those. So it's really he kind of symbolized like a healing of England in a way. And of course, Arthur was king before, whatever, right? They're just going to get into that. So that's just kind of a long and short of it. There's interesting things too, like he probably had diabetes. He was very, he ended up being very large, but early on he was a fairly athletic, handsome man, according to some primary sources. So that's usually why he's played by a dashing person, in a lot of the shows. So anyways, that's just a quick little kind of prelude into it, and get that out of the way, so hopefully I won't have to pause a ton, which I will, because it's what I do. I'm going to try not to, though. But anyways, let's go check it out. All right. All right, so that's it. Enough blabbing for me. We got a long way to go here. So.
Video was made possible by Honey. Keep watching to find out how you can save money when you shop online. Also, the reviews are in. That's some nice merch. Get your brand new character pin, limited time face mask, and more. Link down
And of course, make sure you support these folks.
Sigmund, I don't have much longer. Tell me, was I a good king? You were okay. Will I be remembered as the great warrior king who invaded France, revolutionized English healthcare, and developed great parklands? Probably not, because of the wife killings.
That's all he's known for.
Sigmund, how did
Eat
I
a
get
pig.
here? I still remember the good old days when I was a boy with a heart full of fire, and Mummy would teach me. Okay, Henry, this is a horse. Can you say horse?
He's got Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Divorce. What? No. Okay, let's try this one. Can you say loaf of bread?
Head.
Loaf with her head. No, Henry, that's wrong. You know what? Last one. Okay. Can you say soap? Soap. Yes, that's it. I'm the supreme head of the church. Screw the Pope. You know what? You're my son and I love you, but you're freaking weird, man.
That's funny.
The
I'll try
year
not to pause
is
it. I'll just
1491.
comment.
England has just come out of 3 decades of civil war, in which a bunch of Henrys, Edwards, and one Richard had a little ding-dong over which royal house should rule the realm. Finally, a Henry won, Henry VII, and he had a son. What should we name him? My royal lineage is full of Henrys. A fine name, a vigorous name, a tenacious name, a muscular name. How about Arthur? And so Arthur, Prince of Wales and next in line to the throne, was born.
older brother.
5 years later, Prince Henry was born, but nobody cares about him. He's not the heir, just a spare. The king wanted to make an alliance with Spain, so one day he said to his son Arthur,
Catherine
"Hey,
of Aragon.
baby, you see that lady baby? That's gonna be your wife. But father, I'm not even 3 years old yet. Listen, there's something you have to understand. You're my son. But more than that, you're a political bargaining tool. But you love me, right? I love you as a political bargaining tool. Yay."
Okay, real quick. One of my favorite things, you'll see it in memes and stuff where it says, a girl will say, you wanted me to treat you like a princess, so okay, I'll sell you to the king of Portugal. So, anyway, sorry.
Hey, Pop, who the heck are you? I've written you a poem. Listen here, tiny man. Can't you see that I'm busy? But I'm your son. I have another son? As Arthur was in another palace, being prepped to become king, Henry lived with his mother and 2 sisters at Eltham, where he was being trained for a
Margaret
church
and
career.
Mary, I
And not
think.
just that, Henry learnt languages. He played sports. He learnt the recorder. What a nerd. Am I right? Wrong. Henry was the coolest kid around. So I told my Latin teacher he could kissius my buddius. Anyway, here's Wonderwall. Great scholars and
Wonderwall.
theologians from across Europe came to meet and teach the young Prince Henry, who by all accounts was a very enlightened, bright, and charming young boy. Everybody loved Henry, and out of everything Henry was taught, more than anything, he came to adore and respect theology and Catholicism. One of Henry's tutors was English poet laureate John Skelton, who wrote a textbook for Henry that we still have today. In it, he wrote a number of important lessons for the young prince, such as, do not be mean, loathe gluttony, and do not violate widows. Important lessons for any 9-year-old boy. Around this time, Henry's older brother
she
Arthur,
took to
now
heart.
15 years old, was married to Catherine of Aragon, sealing the union between England and Spain. And then he died. Oh, my alliance with Spain, my poor
was like
alliance
12.
with Spain. And your son, sire? Oh, yes, of course, my son. But mostly my alliance with Spain. Hey, Pop, who the heck are you? Oh, yeah! And just like that, an unprepared Prince Henry was now the new heir to the throne. And how about that alliance with Spain? Well, the solution was simple. Hey, boy, see that full-grown woman over there? That's gonna be your wife. What, my brother's widow? Yes. You're a freaking weirdo, man. Now, in the Bible, there's a verse that says marrying your brother's widow, that's a big no-no. So the king needed to convince the Pope and get his special permission. Hey, can I please have my son marry his brother's widow?
They claim
sure,
they didn't
why not?
consecrate the
And
marriage
so it
because
was.
she
Henry's
was
life
too
was
young.
turned on its head as he was moved to the royal court,
So he got an
next in
annulment.
line to the throne. But tragedy struck when just a few months later, his mother, with whom he was very close, suddenly died in childbirth. The loss of his mother almost certainly had a big effect on the young boy. In his older years, King Henry VII went on a bit of a paranoid trip. As was normal for a king at the time, Henry VII had to quell a number of rebellions, and as he aged, he became ever more suspicious of the nobility around him. To keep them in check, he began levying huge, ruinous fines, left, right, and center. Dukes, bishops, barons, even his own mother. No one was safe from his tyranny, and the nobility of England began to suffer. So when Henry VII finally got sick and died just after Christmas 1508, there was a lot of celebration. Not only because the tyrannical Henry VII was gone, but because his replacement was the ever-popular, charming, and handsome 18-year-old King Henry VIII.
Yeah, he's
Henry
cooking,
married
dude.
Catherine of Aragon
His
in June
face.
1509. You may be wondering, if it's so weird to marry your brother's widow, and since he's now king, couldn't Henry just decide not to? Well, yes, he could, but by now, Henry wanted to. The thing about Henry that was unlike many kings of the time was he married for love, and he had grown quite fond of Catherine, very fond. Historians say their marriage was unusually good, and so he was coronated king. And what a king. Compared to his tyrannical father, he was an absolute joy. Having the blood of 2 royal houses, he was widely supported. He was really, really ridiculously good looking, and those famous calves could achieve world peace. Hey Henry, now that you're king, you know what that means. Costume party! Henry pranced around the palace playing dress up with his friends. He wrote plays, he sang songs, he danced. A true Renaissance man, very different from the gluttonous wife killer we think of today. In his early reign, people from near and far would come to ask favors of the
I've
generous
seen
king.
this before.
Hey man, could I gain ownership of some land near Upton Snodsbury? Sure thing, pal. Hey, could I be an earl or a baron or a viscount or something? Anything you want, man. Could I get just a really cool pig that has freaking metal wings and 8 legs and shoots flippin' lasers and it can grow more pigs out of it for extra pigs? Say no more. Hey, guys, I was just checking up on the financial report and what the hell? We can't afford this. Henry's council that he inherited from his father weren't happy with all the money he was just throwing around, and they worked hard to curb the king's spending. Since they controlled the royal seals needed to get stuff done, at first they were largely able to control the young king. And for Henry, the most infuriating things of all was they wouldn't let him joust with his friends because it was too dangerous, nor would they let him do the thing he wanted most, to go on a great, glorious, and expensive conquest against England's historic enemy, France.
They're always
Please,
going at
guys,
it.
I'll keep it cheap. How? I'm glad you asked. I've got a promo code for the financial burden of war. Yes. Honey is the free browser extension that automatically finds promo codes when you shop online. Imagine you're on one of your favorite websites. Not that one. And you want to reinvent yourself with some fresh new threads. Oh, hi, little dancing man. Got any sick promo codes for me? You do? Nice. You just
can't
saved
hate on
$40
this
your
because,
online shop. You rock
I
star.
get
Honey
emails like
supports
this all the
over
time
30,000 online stores and has
to
already
do
helped
this.
OverSimplified viewers save over $87,000.
But honestly, I'm not sure how many
That's
of
a
them are
lot of moolah.
scams. or
Not having Honey is literally saying no to free money like a crazy person. It's free, finds coupons with one click, and it's now part of the Venmo and PayPal family. So you know it's legit. Get Honey for free at joinhoney.com/oversimplified.
And we gotta support this guy. So
That's joinhoney.com
check out honey.com.
/oversimplified.
It's
And
amazing.
you'll
It'll
also
change
be
your life.
supporting my channel. So thank you. Now, where were we? Oh yeah, sexy calves, excessive spending, and war with France. Henry wanted glory. He wanted to go down in history. If he didn't go to war in France, was he even the King of England? Man, I want to go to war so bad, but the council won't let me. Hey, maybe I can help with that. Whoa, it's Cardinal Wolsey, one of my best friends despite being an old-ass man. Cardinal Wolsey
Cardinal
knew that if he
Wolsey,
helped King
yeah.
Henry, there'd likely be something in it for him. So what was his great, intricate plan to curb the council's power? You're the king, dum-dum. You can do whatever you want. What? Wolsey began writing bills that simply didn't require the seals, and thus Henry was back on top. For his efforts, Wolsey began to climb the ranks, and he became something of a yes man for King Henry, encouraging Henry to frolic and play while Wolsey took care of business. Hey, kid, you want to go on an adventure? Do I ever? The Pope was at war with France and he needed some help. He offered the young, impressionable King Henry 100 Parmesan cheeses, some wine, and a golden rose if he came to the Pope's aid, and Henry was all in. At this point in his
Yeah,
life, he
cheese.
still respected the church and loved the Pope. And here was the chance for war he had been waiting for. He still didn't have an
He was actually titled the protector of the kingdom of God's church or something like that around this time.
heir, a fairly big problem for a monarch at the time. But right now, the only kind of smashing he was interested in was smashing French guys in the face. And so off he went. The English already held the French city of Calais. From there,
This is
Henry
great.
made a glorious victory at the Battle of the Spurs. He took the French cities of Terouanne and Tournai. Word of his victories spread. This was it. Here was the glory he had been waiting for. Back home, his beautiful wife also led armies to victory in Scotland. And better yet, she was pregnant.
Laser
Soon,
pigs.
Henry would have an heir. All of Henry's wildest dreams were coming true. Oh, he ran out of money. As the French prepared to invade Italy, all Henry could do was go home. Well, at least now I have an heir to cheer me up. Bring
Mary.
me my son.
Nope.
Henry, this is Mary. Mary? That's a funny name for a boy. Henry, it's a girl.
He had a little trouble having boys,
This was Catherine's fifth
Which-
pregnancy.
which plays a lot into him having multiple wives. Honestly, that's probably the biggest thing, right?
That had not resulted in a male heir.
Wait, let's look at this real
Happy
quick.
Henry
Wait.
wasn't Catherine's fifth
Okay, pregnancy 1, girl stillborn. Pregnancy 2, boy died in infancy. I think pregnancy 2 or 3 was actually, I don't think it was Catherine's. I could be wrong. I may be able to talk about this later. But there was actually a mistress that he got pregnant. And I think that ended up being, he named him Edward, and he was actually planning on having him be his heir, which caused a lot of problems. But maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. Maybe that'll be a little bit later. So, but yeah, Catherine had a real trouble holding babies, and that's another reason why, you know, in at least in his own mind, he was able to uphold this divorce, because he's like, obviously God doesn't want me marrying her because she's not giving me an heir, right? So that's one of the reasons of the many later.
pregnancy that had not resulted in a male heir. Happy Henry wasn't so happy anymore. You still haven't given me a male heir. Well, how do you know it's my problem? Maybe it's your problem, Henry. It couldn't be my problem because I've been boinking half your maidstaff and one of them gave me a boy. Sure. Yeah, you know what? Maybe it's my problem.
That might be the one.
I'll look into that. Cardinal Wolsey, now Henry's Lord Chancellor, knew his job depended on keeping Henry happy. And so he said, well, if you can't be the great warrior, then how about the great peacemaker? Not as cool, but okay. And so the Field of the Cloth of Gold, a glamorous peace summit between England and France, was held. The King of France, Francis I, was essentially the French version of King Henry. And the whole thing was basically one giant codpiece measuring contest. The two sides did agree to a peace treaty. However,
measuring.
it didn't last long. You see, there was a third major player in European politics at the time, an exquisite specimen of royal inbreeding, an
Was it
heir
Spain?
to a huge inheritance,
Charles
and
V,
a
Spain.
chin that could hit a home run. Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. He was Henry's wife's nephew. Henry had helped him out in the past to put down a Spanish
Yeah,
rebellion,
Spain.
and now the two wanted to make an alliance, and so a marriage
maybe
was
not.
arranged. Mary, I'd like to introduce you to
Wait.
the 20
Holy Roman Emperor, so that is more like Germany. Okay, let me just say this too really quick. I know a lot of people study the hell out of this. Comments are going to be riddled with people saying that I'm way off and I'm wrong on a lot of things. It's been a while, you know. I mean, that's all I got to say. I don't know. It's a lame excuse, but it's been a while. But I think Holy Roman Emperor, I thought Charles V was Spain, but maybe it's Germany. I don't
Now,
know.
the two wanted to make an alliance, and so a marriage was arranged. Mary, I'd like to introduce you to your 22-year-old fully grown adult cousin, and now your future husband. Ew, he looks inbred. Mary! We're all inbred. With their new alliance, Charles and Henry agreed to team up and relaunch a campaign against France. In 1522,
Keep in mind, his own parents were like, they were definitely cousins, I think, because, you know, again, the Lancaster and York split just a few generations before and then came back, you know. So.
the English landed and stormed as far south as Agincourt, but Charles didn't commit significant forces. Whoops, sorry man, not sure what happened. I'll join in next year. The next year, England swept northern France, almost taking Paris. But once again, where was Charles? Oh man, I'm so sorry. I promise, next year, I'll be there. The next year came, and a fed-up Henry decided he was gonna sit this one out. And just as Charles ravaged the French at the Battle of Pavia and captured the French king. Holy crap, dude. Yeah, I totally kicked France's butt. That's great. So, can I have the French throne like we agreed? No. What? And also, I don't want to marry your ugly daughter anymore. Ugly? Have you seen your chin? Mummy says it's a strong chin for a strong boy. As Henry's alliance with Charles fell apart, Henry knew his days as a warrior were over. This was a problem for Henry, but it was a bigger problem for his wife. Catherine of Aragon had two jobs. The first was to give Henry a male heir, but the second was to maintain an alliance with her relatives in Spain, including her nephew. She had failed, and Henry's sexy eyes began to wander. Home from all his wars, Henry ate up his daily 5,000 calories of meat as an infatuation began to grow for one of his wife's ladies in waiting, Anne Boleyn. Beautiful, intelligent, cultured. She was exactly Henry's type.
Now, before he says this, and he probably will, the thing that put his attention on Anne Boleyn the most was she was the one who could say no. He had tons of women, tons of mistresses, all the damn time. But she was very well versed in religion, specifically like Protestant. The new Protestant wave that was kind of coming out of Germany. She was very well versed in it. Her family was. So he liked that, but also everybody was throwing themselves at him. She said no, and that blew his damn mind. So let's see if I'm sure he'll mention that.
Beautiful, intelligent, cultured. She was exactly Henry's type. Now, Henry had had dozens of mistresses, including Anne's sister, but Anne didn't want to just be Henry's side chick. She wanted to be his queen.
Yep.
Henry sent dozens of letters, thirsty love poems. In one, he proclaimed that he would like to kiss her pretty duckies. Henry's loins were on fire, but Anne kept him at just the right distance to drive him crazy and push him to find a way to get rid of his current wife. Wolsey, I want a divorce. And as the representative of the Pope here in England, I expect you to sort it out quickly and quietly.
Give me an annulment,
I don't want this to turn into a Europe-wide scandal. You got it, Your Majesty.
Hey, Big Papa! My boy Henry says he wants to divorce his wife. Any chance?
To Henry's shock and horror, Wolsey deferred the case back to the Pope in Rome. To make matters worse, after all the wars in Europe, the Pope was currently...
Now, here's part of the problem here. So like I said, the Pope, he went way out of his way to grant an annulment from between Catherine and Arthur in the very beginning. He was paid off, and he actually, I don't want to say put himself on the line, but he really pulled some strings to make that happen, right? To allow him to marry in the first place. Well, now that he wants a divorce, it's just kind of like, so I think that played a part in it, actually.
The case back to the Pope in Rome. To make matters worse, after all the wars in Europe, the Pope was currently under the thumb of Charles V. Now everybody knew what was going on,
Holy Roman
and Henry's
Emperor,
divorce trial had become a pawn of greater European politics. For Wolsey, the decision was a disaster. His job was to keep Henry happy, and Henry was very, very unhappy. Nevertheless, the divorce trial began. Henry's case rested upon the Bible verse in Leviticus that claimed marrying your brother's widow would lead to childlessness, and Henry was certainly having a hard time getting a male heir. He argued that the Pope had got it wrong when he allowed Henry to marry his brother's widow, and that now divorce was the only solution.
Screwed up in the annulment.
However, the Pope and Charles V acquired some interesting letters from an unknown source. He wants to kiss her pretty duckies? Man, this guy's loins are on fire. The Pope now knew the case for divorce may not actually be found in Henry's Bible, but in Henry's pants. After escaping Charles V, the Pope did send out one Cardinal Campeggio to oversee the trial. Campeggio was an old man racked with gout. It took him 6 painful months to travel from Rome to England, and when he finally got there, this kept happening. Hey, I need you to take a look at this evidence. I can't. My gout is acting up. Hey, are you ready to take my testimony? I can't. My gout is acting up. Hey, can you please make a decision? I can't. Your gout is acting up. My gout is acting up. Anne Boleyn, with her Protestant views in support of the Reformation, suspected the Pope was just delaying. For 2 whole years, the trial dragged on, and in the end, the Pope simply said,
I did not kiss that woman.
No divorce for you. Henry, the king that had previously defended the Pope militarily from France and intellectually from the reformist ideas of Martin Luther, who had once respected the Pope above all, now found the Pope standing between him and fourth base. Your Majesty, what will you do? I'm the king, dum-dum. I can do whatever I want. What? For his failure, Henry removed Wolsey from the court, a decision that was likely influenced by Anne Boleyn, who disliked the cardinal. Having fallen from grace and with potential charges of treason over his head, Wolsey died of illness a year later. Then, Henry set about removing England from the influence of the Pope. Hey, if you do that, I'll excommunicate you. Who cares, man? Oh no, apathy. My weakness. Henry gathered theologians and scholars together to help him make his case against the Pope. Together, they argued to the people of England that the Pope's rule over the church was basically a takeover of what had once been a self-governing, national English church. And if that sounds familiar, some historians do believe this moment may have laid the foundations for English Euroscepticism. That's right, Brexit may have been influenced by Henry's explosive loins. By and large...
Never mind, we'll get into it. I don't want to...
That's right. Brexit may have been influenced by Henry's explosive loins. By and large, the people gave Henry their support, and those that didn't were going to be in for a rough time. But for now, Henry assumed the role of supreme head of the English church, and his next divorce trial was a foregone conclusion. Catherine of Aragon was Aragon, and Anne Boleyn was in. All right.
Now, really quick, I'm not sure. Maybe this is just something that the Tudors got wrong, but it sounds like Cromwell was not Oliver Cromwell. He comes later, but I think it's Thomas Cromwell. He was actually a big influencer in letting the king know that, hey, it says right here that you are the head of the church, right? Interesting, they haven't talked about Thomas Cromwell yet, but he certainly will be a centerpiece soon. He really went through his right hand yes people, starting with Cardinal Wolsey. I'm surprised later on they'll talk a little bit probably about Sir Thomas More, Thomas Cromwell, right? And every single one of them, they definitely do these where they rise really quickly by telling what he wants, and then they hit the ground really hard. Some of them end up getting executed. It's just really nasty.
Conclusion. Catherine of Aragon was Aragon, and Anne Boleyn was in. All right, I've upended the entire country
divorced.
to be with you, so you'd better give me a son, okay? Now, did you get my letter about the duckies? Having finally married the girl of his dreams, it was party time for Henry. And what a party. Life in the Tudor court was non-stop.
Yep.
Huge.
So what happens when you finally get what you want? Right? I'm pausing more, ain't I? I'm sorry. I'll do better. I'm sorry.
Party time for Henry. And what a party. Life in the Tudor court was non-stop. Huge banquets, with each person eating on average 5,000 calories a day. And no vegetables. Those are for poor people. Rich people ate meat. And so you know what else is for rich people? Constipation. But don't let that stop the party. The toilets are communal. And Henry himself was the center of everything. He ate the best food. He had 1,200 pairs of shoes. He didn't even have to wipe his own bum-bum. Life was great. Everyone, I give you your majesty, King Henry VIII. But how did they pay for it all? Well, influenced by his fairly Protestant new wife, since Henry had overturned the organization of the church, this is how they paid for it.
Let me cut to the chase. This is called the Great oh gosh, I can't think of the name of it. I keep thinking disabsolution. Maybe it's anyways, it's basically a phrase that means that he is going to take all of the monasteries and just liquidate all of them, all of the monks, all of the church fathers. I mean, of course, the churches are big, giant, beautiful, you know. The monasteries are sitting on huge amounts of wealth, even possessions, land. They have huge swaths of land, a lot of farmland, a lot, you know, brewery. I mean, you name it, right? Vineyards and all of that. And he's just going to go and just completely annihilate all of them. If you enjoy historical fiction, you really need to check out. There's a series by C.J. Samsung. I'll put it in the thing. But it's all about a guy who's a lawyer. He's a hunchback, but he's a lawyer in England during the Tudor days, basically. And it's really cool. The first book is all about him kind of investigating murders at these monasteries while all this is happening. So it's really cool to put you kind of in the forefront of what things were like, you know. And then later on, there's books, you know, you really get a sense of what like the Reformation was back then and all that. So it's written C.J. Samsung. Anyways, he's a Scottish, I believe, lawyer and a historian, and he just amazing books. I think there's about 5 or 6 of them. Super good. It goes all the way from King Henry all the way up through. I think the latter books are kind of with where Catherine was queen, Mary was queen, and then Catherine was queen and all that. So check that out if you like that kind of thing.
But how did they pay for it all? Well, influenced by his fairly Protestant new wife, since Henry had overturned the organization of the church, this is how they paid for it. Oh my goodness, how awful. Selling fake fragments of the cross? Vials of Jesus' blood that you got from a duck? Using religion in this way? This is terrible. I must confiscate all this money at once. Yes, how awful. I must take
Relics.
all of this away.
They were big against
immediately.
fighting against
Monasteries
relics.
across the nation were dissolved and their riches placed in the royal coffers. Obviously, many people weren't too happy about this, but Henry had a plan for that as well. Henry's descent into tyranny had begun, as any who rejected his new claim as supreme head of the English church found their heads on the chopping block. And so Henry partied. He danced, he sang, he ate, he jousted.
The horse was like freaked out.
Be me, love gluttony, violate widows. In 1536, Henry fell from his horse in a jousting accident. Not for the first time, but certainly the heaviest fall he had taken yet. Some historians believe the brain damage caused by the incident may have violently accelerated Henry's descent into tyranny. Executions in England ramped up. During his reign, it's estimated 57 to 72.
Now, also, I believe, too, that he had wounds that wouldn't heal, too. Which, again, leads a lot of people to believe that he had diabetes, too. Which would also kind of lead to his, erratic behavior.
Executions in England ramped up. During his reign, it's estimated 57 to 72,000 people were put to death. Rich or poor, big or small, no one was safe. And the most prominent victim of all was to be Henry's own wife. It had been 3 years since their marriage. Anne had been pregnant 4 times, yet she had only been able to produce one healthy child, a girl. What's more, it's possible she had been going around insulting Henry's manhood. Henry's eyes, once again, began to wander. His new top man, Thomas Cromwell, didn't want to end up like Cardinal Wolsey, and so he came up with a plan. There was a court musician who had been quite flirtatious in public with the Queen. Well, Thomas Cromwell and his boys got a forced confession out of him, saying that it didn't stop at innocent flirtation, and the charges came rolling in. Listen, Anne, we need to talk. Oh no, you're gonna divorce me, aren't you? Just like your last wife. Aw, no, come here, shh, no, I'm not gonna divorce you. It's much worse than that. Anne was charged with adultery, perversion, even incest, and plotting to kill the king himself. The jury found her guilty, including her own uncle and ex-fiancé, both fearing the wrath of the king. And on May 19th, 1536, Anne Boleyn was Anne Boleyn. Literally the next...
Something that was kind of interesting that he may have gotten a little bit off here in some of the video is that your typical execution was done with an axe. But they saved swords for royalty. And something kind of interesting about Anne Boleyn's executioner is they actually spent extra money to get basically a world-class executioner and like a world-class swordsman in who would absolutely definitely nail her right on the spot, make it as quick and clean as possible. There was also a way that they kind of like tricked her into thinking that it wasn't quite happening yet, and they did it. So it was all done in a way to make it as humane as possible, right? Something interesting about that, which is very different than, I'm going to cut to the chaser, Thomas Cromwell's, where he was beheaded with an axe, and they supposedly got the executioner really drunk ahead of time, so that he just kept hacking and missing and things like that. So some kind of issue, because it shows him beheading everybody with the sword. So, and I think she actually even got beheaded upright. Again, she didn't know it was coming yet. She was blindfolded, didn't know it was coming, and it just took her by surprise.
1536, Anne Boleyn was Anne Boleyn. Literally the next day, Henry married one of Anne's ladies-in-waiting, Jane Seymour, his third wife. After Anne had smack-talked his manhood, and since he still had no male heir, Henry went on a campaign to ensure the public knew he was as virile as it gets.
So divorced, died. The next one, divorced, murdered, and then Jane Seymour will be died. She's going to die of natural causes. And this truly is a woman he really loves, and he takes her death really hard.
He still had no male heir. Henry went on a campaign to ensure the public knew he was as virile as it gets. He had this famous portrait painted of the manliest man I've ever seen, and later he would even have his physician make a declaration about his health. King Henry is a fine specimen of a man, and please don't make me say this. Say it. And every time I look at him, I wish I was a woman. The truth is, after his jousting accident, the king had badly injured his leg and was no longer very active, yet he was still eating his daily 5,000 calories. So by now, Henry was extremely unhealthy. For the remainder of his life, he would incur a number of illnesses, and his injured leg ulcers would ooze stinking pus. A fine specimen of a man indeed. On the church front, Henry's new and now pregnant wife was a devout Catholic, and she pleaded with the king to reinstate the monasteries. Henry was sick of wives meddling in his business, and he bluntly warned her to remember what happened to Anne Boleyn. Since splitting with the Pope, Henry had been hard at work determining the theology of his new Church of England. It kept many Catholic traditions, while on the other hand embracing some reformist ideas, such as requiring the use of a new Bible not in Latin, but in English. The cover of Henry's new Bible depicted the people appearing to worship a giant King Henry. And in the corner, there's some people being put to death, just for good measure. For any who opposed Henry's ideas, whether Catholic or Protestant, for any who rebelled against him, it would be off with their heads. In October 1537, Henry finally got what he had been waiting for. His wife Jane gave birth to a healthy boy. However, the triumph soon turned to tragedy, as Jane Seymour died days later from complications during the birth. Henry mourned Jane, the woman who had given him a son, for 2 years.
Yeah, he really
Your Majesty, it's time to choose your next wife.
Oh, okay. This story is hilarious. so nowadays, right, you go down a dating app, right, and you look at a woman or a man, whatever, and there's a lot of filters on them, you know, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna hook with that person, and then you see him in public, and you're like, oh shit, right? So it's kind of what happens here. He's already mourning his last wife. They're trying to hurry up and get him married right away. They're like, get off your butt. We need to get you married right away. And so he's like, fine, her, whatever. You know, they show her like a little painting of this. Anne of Cleves is her name. And I forget where she comes from, what country. When he shows up, he takes one look at her. She's like, yeah, she looks like a horse. Get her the fuck out of here, you know. So that's kind of what that goes. So that would be where it's divorced, killed, died. Then it would be another divorced. So he's gonna just divorce her ass right away. Which I don't even know why he married her. I forget.
Your Majesty, it's time to choose your next wife.
Thomas, not now. Can't you see I'm in mourning?
That one. The woman Thomas Cromwell had lined up for Henry's next marriage was the sister of a powerful German duke. But all Henry cared about was that she was pretty as pie. And Thomas Cromwell promised that indeed she was. However, when she arrived in England, Henry was less than pleased. Your Majesty, let me introduce you to your fourth wife, Anne of Cleves. What's that smell? I think it's your legs, sire. No, it's Anne of Cleves. She's ugly. This is treason. What? Off with his head. Henry found his new wife so repulsive that he never consummated the marriage and divorced her just 6 months later. And for bringing Henry an ugly, stinky woman, along with additional charges of plotting treason, Thomas Cromwell lost his
Bye-bye, guys.
head. The very same day of Cromwell's execution.
You know, and I say there's a little more to that as well. Cromwell, I mean, he blamed him a little bit, I think, for some things with Anne Boleyn, I believe. There was just a whole lot of things. I mean, he was constantly being torn between Protestantism and Catholicism, and, you know, because a wife would go one way, a wife would go another way, his right-hand person would go another way, and then you get another one that goes the other way. He was always being torn and pulled and everything, and I think Thomas Cromwell, you know, he started feeling maybe bad about the monasteries, and, you know, just it was just a mixture. And he would, like with Anne Boleyn, he would take out his frustrations, you know, in that fashion. So not to, you know, sugarcoat it, but, you know, it's a little more to it than that. But again, this is oversimplified, right?
Henry married his fifth wife, the famed beauty Catherine Howard. She's believed to have only been 17 at
So really quick, sorry, I keep pausing, but this is very similar. He's in another situation like Anne Boleyn. This is almost like Anne Boleyn 2.0. She's young, she's hot, you know, she's a firecracker. She's basically seducing him in a way, and he kind of marries for lust, just like he did with, you know, Aragorn was kind of out of duty. They said it was out of love, but kind of out of duty. Jane Seymour, that was out of love. You know, now we're going back to lust again. And he's like, you know. So that's kind of like, she's like an Anne Boleyn 2.0, which plays a part later.
Beauty, Catherine Howard. She's believed to have only been 17 at the time. Henry was 49. And like Anne of Cleves, Catherine Howard didn't last long. You see, for some reason, she may not have been entirely satisfied with her 49-year-old fine specimen of a man, and it's possible she engaged in a number of extramarital affairs, including one with her cousin, Thomas Colbert.
Yeah, they were. I
When
thought it was a
Henry
brother,
found
but
out, he was devastated. How could she do this to me? But, sire, don't you have hundreds of mistresses?
Shut up, Barry. That's not the point.
Your Majesty, you're crying. I'm not crying. It's just that sometimes, when I get sad, water comes out of my eyes! For her treason, Catherine Howard met the same fate as Anne Boleyn in 1542. So, we've had divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, look out, here comes survived. Henry married the daughter of a royal official, Catherine Parr, in 1543, and she appears to have been a good companion to Henry. She cared for the aging king, who by now was so heavy it took several men to winch him onto his horse. She acted as a mediator within the family, and convinced the king to restore his two daughters to the line of succession. Their marriage did have one hiccup, however, when Catherine dared disagree with the king over the subject of theology. It's a miracle, because when the priest says the words of institution, the bread turns into the body of Christ. Well, if you put the bread in a box for 3 months, is it a miracle that it turns moldy?
Which I think, don't correct me if I'm wrong, which you will, I know you will, but I think she plays a big part in Elizabeth's ascension to the throne because she was such a Protestant. You know, Mary, because her mother, Catherine of Aragon, was a staunch Catholic, she remained Catholic, and she was queen for just a short time. But I think she played a really big part in nurturing Elizabeth.
Well, if you put the bread in a box for 3 months, is it a miracle that it turns moldy? Treason! You can't just call everything treason, Henry. The king called for her arrest, as serious charges were placed over her head. However, in the end, she told Henry that she had not been disagreeing with him, but simply learning from him. And so when the guards came to arrest her, the king told them to make like an Anne and cleave. Catherine Parr stayed with Henry right until the end. As he aged into his later years, in increasing pain and ill health, he grew ever more suspicious and moody. The once generous, promising young king was now feared by all around him. Sigmund, I don't have much longer. Hold me. Of course, sire. Do you have any final wishes? How about one last conquest in France? And so in 1544, Henry made for Calais. The pesky French had been supporting the Scottish in their ongoing wars with England, and they also owed Henry some money. So the extremely unhealthy king personally led a siege against the French city of Boulogne. The English dug tunnels under the cap.
Look at the horse. The horse is like crushed.
Unhealthy king personally led a siege against the French city of Boulogne. The English dug tunnels under the castle, and on the 13th of September, the French surrendered. A glorious victory for Henry. In actuality, the whole misadventure nearly bankrupted England, and they ended up giving Boulogne back to the French a few years later. But shh, don't tell Henry. He's having his moment. Finally, in 1547, a 55-year-old Henry, lapsing in and out of consciousness, passed away. His son, Edward, succeeded him, but died just 5 years later. His daughter, Mary, briefly took the reins and steered the country back towards the Pope. But then his second daughter embraced reformist ideas and gradually transformed England into a Protestant country. Henry's desperation to marry Anne Boleyn and his resulting feud with the Pope had changed the course of English history and religion forever. Unfortunately, none of Henry's children had heirs, and when Elizabeth I died, Henry's lineage ended, with the House of Stuart replacing the House of Tudor. So then you might think, all that effort, a life filled with so much frustration, yet he never conquered France, he barely had a male heir, and his lineage died out. The egotistical man Henry grew sick and cruel, and then died. So why are we all so fascinated with King Henry VIII? Why not Henry II or IV? Well, without mentioning the many important things his reign did achieve, one of his biggest goals was to go down in history. And you can put a big green check beside that one, because everything he did and how he asserted his control and authority over everyone around him has come to be viewed as the epitome of the word.
Do you hear the music in the background? Supposedly he wrote that. Greensleeves? Listen.
Check beside that one. Because everything he did and how he asserted his control and authority over everyone around him has come to be viewed as the epitome of the word king. And also because of the wife killings? Yeah, definitely the wife killings.
That's what most people remember, right? Awesome. Okay, is that it? That's probably it. All right, I will definitely check more of these out, but let's go ahead and just wrap this up. All right, that was really cool. Thanks for recommending that. That's a lot to learn. There's just stuff that I see other things. French Revolution, that should be good. I'm going to check out more of these for sure. Let me know which ones are your favorites, and I'll go check them out. Just a little bit going from there. Again, he breezed over it real quickly because it doesn't have much to do with Henry VIII. But because Edward IV, I believe it was Edward IV. No, wait. I made a mistake earlier. I said that York and Lancaster were from Edward III. It was Edward I. Because Edward II... Yeah. So anyways, I think this was Edward IV. Would have been his son. Died early. And then Mary became queen shortly after that. They call her Bloody Mary, right? So because she was very despotic Catholic, and she tried to kind of undo everything her father did and push England back to Catholicism. And then she, I believe, was executed. And then finally, Elizabeth kind of came to the throne, I think with the help of, God, it's so confusing. There's so many Annes and Catherines. The last wife. I can't think right now. I'll put it in the... Okay. So the thing about that is Elizabeth, she never had an heir. She never married. She reigned for a very long time and was a damn good queen. But basically, in the end, to secure her heir was actually Mary, Queen of Scots' son, which, again, comes from the Stuart line. So then we have a line of Stuarts and all of that. So I think it was James was her son. So then it starts going in that direction. You got the Stuarts for a while, and then, then the Windsors and all that. So super interesting stuff. Again, if you like it, check out that author I told you about, C.J. Samson, I think is his name. Really, anything by Philippa Gregory is awesome too. Really good stuff. So either way, I enjoyed this. Let me know what else you need. I'm sorry this is such a long video, but I look forward to talking to you in the comments. Please be gentle. It's been a while, and I've been dabbling in so many different kinds of sources. Some of them might be wrong. I don't know. So anyways, everybody, though, if you're new to the channel, welcome. I'll see you in the comments. Until then, though, everybody, please be safe, healthy, and be nice to each other.